The Hungarian Grand Prix has concluded, and there are many topics to discuss. Leclerc's missed victory, which ultimately ended with a fourth-place finish in a race like Hungary where overtaking is realistically only possible in Turn 1 after the issues faced by his car, and we will also look into the causes of Leclerc's problems. We need to talk about Norris's victory over Piastri, so he takes this win, which also boosts the championship for the second half of the season. Piastri was very disappointed with the missed victory. We also need to discuss Russell's podium, the clash between Verstappen and Hamilton, with Hamilton leaving the door open, Verstappen passing through. There are many topics to cover, and we will do it together in this video. Of course, before we start, please leave a support like, subscribe, activate notifications if you're not already subscribed, and make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. Let's cover all the news related to Formula 1 and Ferrari. That said, let's get started with the standings. Second victory for McLaren in Formula 1, and we see Norris out front. Norris in first place, finishing 6/10, almost 7/10 ahead of Piastri in second, who attempted an attack. We saw him lose the opportunity in the penultimate lap. He couldn't pass. Piastri made a mistake, with Norris having driven a race. He executed a good strategy for sure, but his start was disappointing. However, after that disappointing start, he managed to find a good pace. So, we can consider Norris's race as overall positive, but he still needs to improve. He makes many mistakes, and his own team admits it. He acknowledged it in a team radio. I told him, "Lando, stay focused. We don't want to see these mistakes." Despite everything, he concludes this first part of the season with this very important victory for the championship. 284 points for Piastri, 275 for Norris, just 9 points separating the two McLaren drivers. A McLaren double podium, with Russell in third and Charles Leclerc in fourth. Guys, Leclerc finished 42 seconds behind Norris. 42 seconds behind Norris, starting from pole position, making a good first stop, but after the second stop, everything went wrong. He lost a lot of time, lost positions to Piastri and Russell. But I want to start the analysis with the analysis of this race from Leclerc's team radio, because we're going to watch it together, then we'll also listen to Charles, and here we see Lex saying, I hear, what we discussed before the race. We need to discuss these things before, doing them. Before doing these things, they must be discussed before the race. This is fundamental. So Charles criticizes the method, the pre-race briefing they do at Ferrari. Then we move on. We're going to lose this race with these issues. We're not going to waste too much time. Even here, they knew about an internal problem at their Ferrari that caused a penalty for Charles after the second stop, and we go to the most iconic redo team. This is so frustrating. We lost all our competitiveness, and you should listen to me. You should listen to me. I would have found a different way to address and manage these problems. Now the car is simply unmanageable. It's a miracle if we end up on the podium. And spoiler, Charles didn't end up on the podium. He also lost his position to Russell, who at the start of the race no one expected to be on the podium, and no one thought Charles could finish outside the podium. There was even talk of a possible victory for Charles, but that didn't happen. Before I give my opinion and analyze what Charles said, the situation at Ferrari, I first want to listen to Leclerc's team radio. Then we'll discuss the McLaren situation, and also talk about Hamilton and Verstappen. But first, let's listen to Charles and his team radio. This is so incredibly frustrating. We lost all competitiveness. This is the most iconic team radio from Leclerc in this Grand Prix. A unique disappointment on my part from Ferrari, because they threw everything away. Objectively, it was a possible victory, but beyond just bringing home the win, which was something they could have tried for, it wasn't guaranteed. Also, considering that McLaren was playing with two top drivers, both Piastri and Norris, while unfortunately Ferrari only had Leclerc up front, which forced Hamilton to start from 12th position due to qualifying issues that prevented him from qualifying further ahead. So Ferrari was competing against a McLaren, 1 versus 2, we can say, Ferrari with Leclerc and McLaren against Piastri. Acronym. There was already a disadvantage in favor of McLaren, if we want to say, and however, the situation was already difficult to manage because they employed two different strategies. Rightly so at McLaren, they nailed everything in this race. And so they used a two-stop strategy with Piastri and a one-stop with Norris. It turned out that Norris's strategy was the right one because he ended up losing the least time on the track. Norris started poorly, found himself, let's remember, trapped behind Alonso at the start of the race, and then had to overtake him, and so he was also behind Russell, making it a very difficult situation. Norris even thought about winning this race. Despite that, they risked the strategy with Norris, who managed to win. Piastri employed the same strategy as Leclerc, so he marked Leclerc man-to-man, managed to do the undercut first at the start, and then stopped after Piastri, despite stopping after Piastri in the second pit stop compared to Leclerc. He managed to pass them on the track because Charles had no rhythm after the second stop, and he said he would approach the problem differently. In my opinion, the best thing for Charles was not to stop at that point. Make a stop, try to go to the end with a hard tire after the first stop, and manage the pace. Surely, in that case, Piastri wouldn't have stopped for the second stop. He would have continued, and Norris would have caught up with them. That's for sure, because he has fresher tires than the other two, but in that case, you let the two McLaren drivers fight among themselves behind, and maybe you could have taken advantage and tried to win, or at least bring home a podium. That was Leclerc's minimum goal. And instead, even the podium slipped away because of this additional stop. Also because if you make an additional stop, it was probably difficult to lose the podium, so he would have at least finished third, which was a minimum result after starting from the pole in a circuit like Hungary where overtaking is difficult. Sorry for the outburst, but I wanted to share my analysis, my take on the race, how I saw it from the outside, and what could have been done better, obviously, at that moment. Of course, it's worth mentioning that not everything went wrong. Ferrari showed a good pace in the first part of the race, maintaining a rhythm comparable to McLaren's, which was something that until a few races ago, let's say, was impossible. And simulations also indicated that McLaren was about 20 seconds faster. In the end, it proved to be like that, but in the first part of the race, it looked like a McLaren at Ferrari's level, so actually a Ferrari at McLaren's level, we can say. So, that was a great thing, and they were also very good during the pit stops. Ferrari made them quickly. So, there are some positive things that need to be acknowledged. There are also some negative aspects that are obvious and then demonstrate the frustration Leclerc experienced during the race, which is completely understandable. That said, we must acknowledge the second victory, of course, for McLaren. Here it is, a victory in Formula 1. There are some random names: Niki Lauda, Kimi Räikkönen, Prost, of course Ayrton Senna, many champions depicted, including Jenson Button, many champions shown in this image. We also have Fernando Alonso on the McLaren podium, which once again shows us a superior car compared to the others, especially in tire management, particularly in thermal management of the tires. How they managed to do all the laps is something incredible. However, it must be said that in this race Mercedes also improved significantly. In fact, I will show you that Mercedes still posted the fastest lap in 1 minute and 11.4 seconds with Russell, and Russell was consistently running at the pace of the high 20s at the end of the race. McLaren was running in the 20.6 to 20.7 range, Russell in the 20.9s, but he still drove very strongly. Also, Russell later managed to run in the low 20s towards the end of the race, maintaining a pace in the 19ths, and kept a good rhythm. Mercedes performed well in this race, I must say. Arriving in front of Ferrari demonstrates how much of a step back Mercedes took by returning to the previous suspension. Let's say Russell especially was promoted because he managed to reach the podium, so a lot for them. Dovi, also, let's briefly comment on the situation we saw between Russell and Leclerc. In my opinion, however, Leclerc is right because he says Russell's penalty was because he moved during braking. He made a double trajectory change, but guys, if we don't let them race, if we don't let these drivers have some fun on the track, we won't enjoy it either. Let them race, let them have some fun, even with some contact, a little bit of wheel-to-wheel, a little bit of racing. Otherwise, we keep them always silent, and we only like to see overtakes with DRS. We want to see some real battles on the track, so I really appreciated that Leclerc was defended this way. I don't think it warrants a penalty. It's good not to penalize. Russell is exaggerated in both the first and second cases. The first case was exactly his first attempt at an attack. That is, there was no need to necessarily give a penalty. It would have been extraordinary if they had penalized now. In the second case, it's true that he made that change in trajectory. It's also true that Charles exaggerated in curve 2, but that's just how it is. From my perspective, a driver must give his all to defend his position. Otherwise, let's not call it Formula 1 and call it Formula Kids, I don't know. I mean, let them race on the track from my point of view. Then, of course, if there are moves that are clearly wrong, penalties should be applied. For example, in 2021, there were many incidents involving Max, Verstappen, and Hamilton, which were very questionable. Some penalizable actions were penalized, others that could have been penalized were not, but that's okay. It's just how it is. So, it's okay to let them race on the track. It looks a bit like Formula 1, always a little too intense, in my opinion. From that perspective, I mean, they try to penalize too much. Let's let them race a bit more and avoid these team radios where they always ask for penalties against the opponent. I think the FIA should be more strict in this regard, as they don't really listen to the drivers. That way, the drivers would stop making these team radios that are also a bit annoying. I'll also show you, considering the stands, the overtake by Russell on Leclerc. Let's watch together. Here, from the stands, you can see the start. Of course, you can't see the full overtake, but after R, he overtook Charles, and it looked like something really impossible at the start of the race. Yet, look at the gap here on the 60-second lap. Charles finished in 19.77 seconds right in front of the McLaren pair, so he was really far behind with Russell, who had set the fastest lap. Then he overtook Charles on the track. I'll show you that as well earlier. I want to particularly show you Verstappen's overtake on Hamilton, and then we'll also comment on Hamilton's race because, guys, we need to be a bit more open about this. First, I'll show you the overtake that was a bit controversial in this case, Let's move on. See Verstappen approaching here from the inside. He overtakes Hamilton in this case at an impossible spot, turn 4. Hamilton moves aside and lets Verstappen pass. We've seen that there was an investigation. They also investigated Verstappen. In this case, a somewhat risky overtaking by Verstappen. He exaggerated in that instance, but Hamilton also shouldn't have moved. He should have tried to stay on the track and make a bit more noise. Seeing Hamilton a bit disheartened in this race, in fact, he started 12th and finished in 12th place, a disappointing race for Hamilton, and this also relates somewhat to the discussion we had about Charles Leclerc. Meaning that if Leclerc had started in front in pole position with Hamilton in 3rd or 4th, it would have been a different race. Ferrari could have played it with two front-runners, both with Charles and Hamilton. They could have differentiated their strategies, tried to block one of the two drivers, papaya, and thus aim for a real fight for victory, managing their pace better. Since only Leclerc was ahead, Hamilton was forced to climb from 12th position. It's normal that that victory was almost lost, that it was a really difficult win for Leclerc to bring home, because he was forced to fight alone against two drivers who, moreover, were driving a superior car. Currently, McLaren is faster than Ferrari in race pace, so Hamilton, I'm really sorry for the situation he is experiencing, because it's definitely a tough situation. Starting behind his teammate who was out yesterday in Q2 and today finishing even outside the points with Ferrari, starting 12th and finishing 12th. The one who's used to making extraordinary comebacks has disappointed me a bit today, and we have to say that because I expected more from Hamilton. He definitely also employed a different strategy compared to his rivals, starting with hard tires, then switching to medium tires. One-stop strategy. Yes, that's true. Perhaps the strategy was not the best because starting with the ARD in Hungary, then you cannot overtake at the start of the race. You're forced. You find yourself in traffic, and it's difficult to catch up later because the others are so far ahead. They gained a lot of seconds of gap, so it's hard to catch up later. However, we expected a bit more. We saw Verstappen who, despite everything, managed to make a better comeback with a Red Bull that was more struggling than Ferrari today. So Verstappen's comeback, from my point of view, was better than Hamilton's. Even though Hamilton had a car that Charles showed was better than the Red Bull, that's for sure. So, it's a pity for Hamilton because I expected more. I'll also show you a very interesting graphic that shows us a statistic about. This is the conversion of Charles Leclerc's pole position wins from when he started racing in Ferrari in 2019 up to Hungary 2025. Look at how many times he started from pole and how many times he managed to convert that pole into a victory. 27 poles, 5 poles converted into wins. This is a problem. This is an obvious fact, an evident problem for Ferrari and particularly for Charles. I also want to highlight the different races where he managed to bring the car home and achieve a victory from pole position. Belgium 2019, his first win in Formula 1, Monza 2019, Bahrain 2022, Australia 2022, and Monaco 2024. We know that the 2019 car, the 2022 car, were two very strong qualifying cars, very fast, but struggled a lot with race pace. Whereas the 2023 to 2024 cars were stronger, and also in 2025, they are stronger in race pace, less so in qualifying if we want. Monaco 2024 is the only exception, if we want to call it that, of modern times where he managed to secure pole and victory, but Monaco is hard to overtake, and Hungary 2025 still slips away from Charles. A bit of it is him not being able to convert these wins, these pole positions into victories because, in my opinion, he feels some pressure. He sees ghosts. We even heard at the start of the race things like, "Oh, what are these cuts, these penalties?" It still seemed like they were engine cuts, I don't know. So, he has this constant pressure living between Saturday and Sunday, and of course, the car doesn't help because it always has reliability issues that have been recurring since he started racing for Ferrari in 2019. Especially when Ferrari starts from the front on pole. We see many reliability problems. First, engine reliability, specifically the engine that could potentially break. So we also saw some lift and coast problems, and we saw many issues with the pit stop strategy. Ferrari has experienced numerous problems over these years that have compromised Leclerc's chances of fighting for the victory despite starting from pole position. That said, we still saw a great McLaren and a positive Ferrari, I must say, because the behavior of the rear suspension was good. Even though Black Car didn't win, I believe the issue was more related to the car itself rather than the race conditions. We discussed fuel, brakes, and mainly the rear suspension, which worked well in Ferrari because the pace was good. Yesterday in qualifying, they did a good job, so the car was competitive. He obviously performed a magic trick, but even in the race today, the pace was very good in the first part of the race. We really saw Charles in the first part of the race who was consistent with McLaren's pace. From the second pit stop onwards, let's say the crisis, if we want to call it that, of Leclerc occurred. So, they also say that Charles had a problem with the chassis from the second part of the race, so this is something I am reporting to you live now, based on the post-race statements. This could have definitely affected the second part of the race, causing a loss of rhythm of about 1.5 seconds, I remind you, from the second part of the race onwards. So, in addition to the issues with fuel management, lift and coast management, brake management, there is also a chassis problem for Charles, who continues to, stay on Charles, who, when starting from pole, faces these misfortunes that prevent him from winning. So we will see a bit more in-depth discussion. We will also explore it together in the coming days about the nature of this problem with Charles' chassis. The fact is that the disappointment is evident. I'll also show you this image of Leclerc looking dejected after the race, where he didn't even make it to the podium. This is somewhat similar to a track like Hungary, which is similar to Monaco in some ways, where overtaking is difficult. Finishing so far back is really, really alarming. Let's listen to Hamilton's team radio at the end of the race. I want to share it with you and then comment on it. Basically, this is the team radio. Sorry for the longer clip,
Pretty sorry about this
I
weekend,
thought
guys.
he was going to
For these
say
few
something
points.
more. Instead, he just said, "Sorry for the weekends, for the points lost." So it's a shame, really a shame for Hamilton for this really disappointing weekend. So it's a tough situation for both Leclerc and Hamilton. This summary was also published by Scuderia Ferrari, P4 Leclerc, P12 Hamilton. A few points lost, but it must be said that these are also points lost in the Constructors' Championship compared to Mercedes. In fact, we see here a plus 16 for Mercedes, plus 12 for Ferrari, not too many. Ferrari remains second in the Constructors' standings, but we definitely expected something more. Red Bull is only slightly ahead with only Verstappen scoring points, so even worse. It's a difficult situation to live through, especially because of the expectations created on Saturday, and then the conclusion, and what we saw, it didn't materialize in the race, so to speak. And I will also share now Leclerc's statements, what he said after the race ended. So, in the car, we didn't have all the information. Now we do. We had a problem from lap 40 on the chassis, so at that moment I was just a passenger. I am very disappointed, but these are the races, and at least we know what happened. We have all the information. We know what happened in this situation. In short, the problem was confirmed with the chassis, and I emphasize this because at the start of the race there was still some doubt, but now we have the official confirmation from Charles. So, the problem is with the chassis, which will also be analyzed in upcoming videos. We will analyze it together. That said, tell me your opinion about the race. What scenario did you like the most, and which did you like the least? As always, I look forward to your comments to discuss it together. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos coming out here on the channel. Every day, we comment on all the news related to Formula 1 and Ferrari. That's all for now. See you in the next one.